All right, everyone, welcome back. Today, we're strapping on our hard hats, getting ready to dive into some CCDC contracts.
Yeah.
And specifically, we're going to be talking about allowances today.
Okay.
These are important because these are those little clauses that can really make or break a project, right? Just
Absolutely.
in terms of, keeping things on budget and on time.
That's right. And we're going to be pulling from Texto Colado today to, help illustrate some of these points and give you a little bit of an edge.
Yeah, I mean, because no one wants to be caught off guard by like hidden costs, right?
Right.
Or like delays that pop up.
Yeah. No one wants that.
So think of this as your like crash course, I guess, in allowances and how to like master them, right?
Yeah. Knowledge is power. Right.
Exactly. Exactly.
Especially with contracts.
Mhm. So the source material that we're looking at today kind of dives right in and it talks about these two main types of allowances.
Okay.
And we're going to, go through each one in detail. But just at a high level, the two that you'll probably encounter most often are cash allowances and contingency allowances.
Right.
And so let's start with the cash allowances.
Okay.
So imagine this. You're a developer, right? And you're breaking ground on this new office complex.
Okay.
And you know that you're going to need these like really fancy custom designed light fixtures for the lobby.
Yeah. Got to have those.
But the problem is that you haven't really nailed down like what exactly they're going to look like or even like who you're going to buy them from, the supplier.
Right.
And so this is where a cash allowance comes in.
Right. It's essentially setting aside a pot of money for that work that has to happen.
Right.
You just don't know exactly how much it's going to cost yet.
Yeah, it's like we're earmarking this for like fancy lights, but we don't know how much the fancy lights are going to cost,
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
And this is where, I think it gets kind of interesting because it's in the best interest of both the owner and the contractor to kind of get these like sorted out pretty early on.
Right.
Right. I mean, imagine like if the project's delayed because like you can't agree on what the light fixtures are going to be.
Yeah, that's a headache and a half.
Oh, yeah. That sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, you've got delays, you've got costs going up.
Disputes, for sure.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no one wants that.
So what does it say in Texto Colado about how to kind of avoid those issues?
Well, yeah, and they really stress early and frequent communication. And this is something that, I think it's easy to kind of forget about, But they're saying that the owner and the contractor really need to like work together to review and to price these cash allowances as soon as they can.
Right.
And that if they do that really helps everyone stay on track and avoid those like, those budget problems.
Right. And it doesn't have to be, a combative thing.
Right.
It's about working together.
Collaboration, yeah.
Yeah.
Not combative, yeah.
Yeah. And aside from avoiding the conflict, there's a real financial incentive for both parties to be on the same page with this.
Oh, okay. How so?
So the source material that we're looking at, it points out this really important detail that people often miss.
Okay.
When you're looking at cash allowances, the contractor's profit, that's not actually included in that initial amount.
Oh, interesting.
It's added later based on what the actual cost is.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, let's say that like the cost of these fancy lights ends up being way more than the cash allowance.
Right.
So then the owner's on the hook to pay the difference, but then also the contractor gets to add their profit margin onto that extra amount on top of that.
You got it.
Okay.
But on the flip side, if they manage to bring that cost in under the allowance,
Okay.
then the contract price goes down, but the contractor still gets their profit margin on that original amount.
So there's like a win-win there, right?
Exactly.
Because if we can find some savings, it helps the owner and the contractor still gets their profit.
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a really good incentive to work together.
I like that a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not often that you see that in a contract.
Right.
Where it's like actually incentivizes people to like work together,
Totally.
Okay, so let's move on to contingency allowances. So
Okay.
this is where we get into like the unknowns, right?
Right.
Because not everything in construction can be like, planned out exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all about having a safety net, right?
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, a safety net.
So that's what contingency allowances are for.
Yeah, it's money set aside for those things that, we didn't see coming.
Right, because there are always going to be those unexpected issues, those changes. Things come up.
Yeah, and it could be anything, right? Like let's say during the excavation, all of a sudden they find like an old sewer line that wasn't on the plans or something.
Oh, yeah.
A classic.
A classic construction surprise.
And that's where that contingency allowance would come in.
Right.
And now here's how this is a little bit different than the cash allowance, right?
Okay.
Is that the contingency allowance, it includes the contractor's overhead and profit up front.
Right.
Whereas we don't do it that way with the cash allowance. So why is that? Like, what's the thinking there?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think it really comes down to how each allowance is used, right?
Okay.
So remember, contingency allowances, it's all about these unknowns.
Right.
We don't know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So if we just include the contractor's overhead and profit from the beginning,
Okay.
it's clear, how those funds will be used if they need to be used.
Okay.
And
so you're kind of eliminating any disagreements later down the line about, like, well, how much should the contractor get paid for dealing with this, problem?
Yeah, it avoids a lot of those disagreements. And, when you're dealing with a problem on a job site, the last thing you want to be doing is arguing about money.
Totally. Yeah, time is money, right?
Exactly.
And speaking of, being on the same page, being transparent, like we talked about earlier, let's say, I'm putting my owner hat on, right?
Okay.
And I'm putting together my project budget, and I'm looking at these CCDC contracts, and I'm trying to figure out, strategically, like, okay, do I want to try to bake in this contingency allowance to the contract itself?
Right.
Or am I better off kind of keeping that as a separate thing, in my own little budget over here?
That's a big question, and there's really no right or wrong answer.
Right.
It depends on a few things. So first off, like, how comfortable are you as the owner? With a certain level of transparency, because having that contingency allowance right there in the contract, it means everyone can see it.
Right.
It's like all out in the open, how much is allocated for,
The what ifs. Yeah.
Exactly. The unexpected.
Yeah.
The stuff you didn't plan for.
Okay, that makes sense. But I could also see how some owners might be a little, like, hesitant to put all their cards on the table like that. Maybe they'd rather kind of keep that contingency money a little bit closer to the vest,
Right. And some owners choose to do that.
Yeah.
They want that control.
Right.
Right. If they keep it separate,
Keep it in their own.
they can manage that money, directly.
Right.
They don't necessarily have to tell the contractor every little thing if they don't want to.
So it really becomes like a judgment call based on, like, the owner's, like, risk tolerance.
Yeah.
And, like, their relationship with the contractor.
It's all about relationships in this business, right?
It's huge. Yeah.
Right.
It's all about who you know.
Right.
So it sounds like, it doesn't have to be like an all or nothing thing either, right?
But no, not at all.
Like an owner could...
You can get creative.
Okay.
You can do a little bit of both.
Yeah. So they could put some contingency in the main contract and
maybe.
then keep some,
Exactly.
like, their own emergency fund.
Yep, their rainy day fund.
Okay.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Just in case,
Just in case.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Right.
Because it adds, like, that extra layer of strategy to it, right?
It does.
It's not just about the number.
It's not just about the money.
It's about, like, who's in control?
Yeah.
How much transparency is there?
Control, transparency, and what works best for everybody.
Right.
For that specific project.
For that specific situation. Exactly.
Okay, this is really helpful, I think.
Good.
So, okay, let's say we've got our contingency allowance.
Okay.
Right. It's either in the contract or it's, the owner's like got it stashed away.
Right.
But then lo and behold, stuff hits the fan, as it always seems to do in construction, and we need more money.
Oh, no.
Than we had originally planned, So what happens then? What's the process?
That is where things can get a little tricky.
Okay.
But luckily, our friend Texto Colado, they lay out the process.
Okay, good.
So once that contingency allowance, it's tapped out, it's gone.
It's gone.
Any changes to the project?
Yeah.
You got to do something called a change order.
Change orders? Ooh, those sound scary.
A little bit, yeah.
Like a lot more paperwork.
There's always paperwork.
Yeah, and probably a lot more negotiation.
Right.
So tell me more. What is a change order?
So basically, a change order, it's like you're hitting pause on the original contract and you're saying, okay, we need to make some changes.
Okay.
So it could be, like you were talking about before, maybe they found something during excavation.
Right, like that sewer line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or maybe the owner decides halfway through that they want to change something.
They got a better idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, using your example, let's say they decide they want to add, like, a rooftop garden.
Oh, nice. I like it.
Right.
Fancy.
A great idea.
Yeah.
But not in the original plan.
Not in the budget.
Right. So that would trigger a change order.
Okay, so that makes sense.
And here's the thing.
Yeah.
The key difference between using the contingency allowance versus doing the change order.
Okay.
Change order needs everyone to sign off.
So both the owner and the contractor?
The owner, the contractor, everybody's got to agree.
Okay.
And it might involve renegotiating the cost.
Oh, okay.
And the timeline.
Right, because now you've added a rooftop garden.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's not a small thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I imagine that's probably where it can get.
It can, oh, yeah.
It can get a little messy.
Right, because someone might feel like they're, like, getting a raw deal or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So communication is key.
Communication, always.
Always, you've got to keep talking.
So, okay, just to, like, kind of recap here.
Yeah.
It sounds like if you're using the contingency allowance, you're basically, like, taking money out of, like, this pre-approved fund.
Exactly, yeah, you're dipping into the pot.
Okay, whereas the change order is more like, we're hitting the pause button, we're figuring this out.
Right, it's a whole renegotiation.
New plan.
Exactly.
Totally.
New plan, new budget, maybe new timeline.
Right, so understanding how those two things are different is really, really critical.
It's critical. Yeah, if you're an owner, if you're a contractor, you got to know this stuff.
For sure.
Because it's all about managing risk. Right.
Yeah.
Making sure those costs don't get out of control. Right, right.
And, dealing with those curveballs.
Because there are always curveballs.
Always curveballs. Yeah, this is construction.
Yeah. Speaking of curveballs, this reminds me of this project I heard about a while back.
Yep.
It was this massive hospital renovation.
Okay.
And, everything was going fine until it wasn't.
Oh, boy.
They hit a snag, a big one.
Oh.
Turns out there were these, like, ancient foundations under the site, like completely unmapped. No one knew they were there.
Wow, that's not good.
And for a hospital, timelines, budgets, everything's like really tight.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You can't be messing around with that stuff on a hospital.
No, not at all. And this is where, it really showed like how important it is to get those allowances right.
Okay.
Because they had like a pretty small contingency allowance, built into the contract.
Oh, yeah.
And it was gone like that.
Yeah, with those foundations, it's probably going to eat up the whole thing.
Excavation, redesign, it was just like, forget it.
So then they're stuck trying to do change orders for everything.
Yeah, and you can imagine how that went.
Oh, I can only imagine. I'm guessing.
Delays, costs through the roof, and the relationship between the owner and the contractor.
Oh, yeah.
Let's just say it got a little chilly.
Yeah, that'll do it.
So, what's the lesson here, right? What did they learn?
Well, I think the big one is you can't underestimate the unknowns.
Right.
Especially on something as complicated as a hospital.
Right.
So going forward, they were like, okay, we need bigger contingencies.
Smart.
Yeah, whether it's in the contract or just in our back pocket.
Yeah. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Right?
Exactly. And part of that preparation is, having the money is one thing.
Right.
But who can use it?
Right.
What happens when it's gone?
You got to have a plan.
You'd have a plan, yeah.
Communication.
Always.
This has been really good.
Good, I'm glad.
I feel like we covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah, we talked about cash allowances, contingency allowances,
change orders. Oh my! All the good stuff.
All the exciting stuff.
Yeah, the things that make or break a project.
Exactly. So for everyone listening, remember those allowance sections in your contracts.
Important stuff.
Don't just skip over them.
Read them carefully.
Yeah, they're important. They're there to help you.
Exactly. They're tools.
Manage that risk.
Control those costs.
Stay on track.
That's the goal.
Even when, because something will go wrong.
Oh, guaranteed.
Yeah, that's construction.
It always happens.
So be prepared.
Be informed, be prepared. You got this.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Till next time, everyone,